Mark your calendars. We'll soon learn how much time a federal judge will give Sean Diddy Combs after he was convicted this summer on 2 prostitution-related charges. His high-powered defense attorneys are urging for release as they got some famous names to write letters of support for the Bad Boy Records founder. We're breaking down who's still on Diddy's side even after he was acquitted on the more serious charges of racketeering conspiracy.
The walls of prison have always had a way of stripping away the illusions that men build around themselves. They tear down egos, they crush pride, and they reduce even the strongest of men to their most vulnerable state. For Sean Diddy Combs, a man who once built his entire identity around being larger than life,
Diddy's lawyers wrote in a recent court filing their client has been punished enough, but will the judge agree next week when he officially sentences the mogul? Or will that even matter, as there still could be a possibility he could get a new trial? It's officially been more than a year since Sean Diddy Combs has been locked up in a federal detention center in Brooklyn, New York. Ahead of his trial, his lawyers pushed for pre-trial release, and that was denied after every request, even after he was only convicted on the Mann Act charges or transportation to engage in prostitution, as Diddy's lawyers chalk up those charges to an alternative or swingers lifestyle. But the judge still kept the mogul behind bars pending the outcome of his sentencing. In his ruling, Judge Arun Subramanian wrote, while Combs may contend at sentencing that this evidence should be discounted and that what happened was nothing more than a case of willing swingers utilizing the voluntary services of escorts for their mutual pleasure, the government takes the opposite view, that Cassie Ventura and Jane were beaten, coerced, threatened, lied to, and victimized by Combs as a part of their participation in these events. Diddy's federal trial had bombshell testimony seemingly every single day of trial. However, he was still acquitted on 3 of his 5 federal charges. However, that didn't mean his Hollywood peers publicly welcomed him back with open arms. There are some, though, who are supporting him ahead of his sentencing, like his former girlfriend, Caresha Brownlee, better known as Young Miami. She wrote in part, quote, "My name is Caresha Brownlee. I'm a mother, daughter, sister, and a hip-hop artist who has spent many years in the public eye. I want to be clear that I cannot speak on or defend anything that may have happened before I met Sean Combs. I do not condone any wrongdoing. I can only speak from my personal experience and the man I've come to know over the past 4 years." One of my most meaningful memories was when he took me to my first Met Gala. It wasn't just about the event, it was about what it represented. Sean has always made it a priority to open doors for Black people to make it sure we are seen, heard, and valued in spaces where we've historically been excluded. That night reminded me that we belong in every room, at every table, and in every conversation. He's constantly encouraged me and so many others to dream bigger, walk in confidence, and never shrink who we are to make others comfortable. I've also witnessed him doing real inner work. He made the choice to check himself into anger management, start therapy, and commit to physical healing through therapy. That takes strength, humility, and self-awareness. He didn't do it for show. He did it because he wanted to grow and to become a better person. In my personal experience, Sean is not a danger or threat to the community. He is a man of God, someone who uplifts, supports, and inspires those around him to be better mentally, physically, and spiritually. But more than anything, he's a father, and his kids are the ones who look up to him the most. They need him. His presence, love, and guidance matter deeply in their lives. I truly believe that he belongs at home with his family, the people who mean the most to him, and who continue to be his greatest source of purpose and strength. Judge, that's a good man. Music producer Dallas Austin wrote in part, "As I have become to know Sean over the years, he has become like a brother to me. I have always seen him as a man of unwavering dedication to his loved ones, his family, especially his mom and children. He is a devoted father whose family always comes first, and the balance he maintains between his personal and professional life is both inspiring and admirable." Former Love and hip hop star and music producer Stephen Jordan, aka Stevie J, wrote in part, "Being in this entertainment business for 30 years and being friends with Sean, we've both endured personal challenges with anger and drugs, as I've been going to therapy and taking all the necessary precautions never to look back at addiction again. I'm proud of Sean. I've read in the press that he's clean and sober and also taking anger management therapy to become a better person, because we all fall short as long as we correct ourselves and never revert to our old ways." Now that's just scratching the surface. The defense submitted more than 65 letters of support in favor of Combs to the judge. There are also letters from each of his children, with the exception of his daughter, who's a toddler. However, his youngest daughter's mother, Dana Tran, wrote a letter of support.
prison has proven to be the one place he cannot control. No amount of money, no amount of fame, No amount of power has been able to shield him from the brutal reality of life behind bars. And now, pushed to his breaking point, the world has watched him unravel completely in front of a judge, begging for his immediate freedom. His voice filled with desperation, his body trembling under the crushing weight of defeat. The courtroom scene itself was haunting. The man who once strutted across red carpets in designer suits, surrounded by flashing cameras and loyal entourages, shuffled into the room in shackles, his head low, his spirit visibly fractured. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the aura of invincibility. Gone was the persona of a mogul who lived untouchable at the top of the entertainment world. In its place stood a man beaten down by prison walls, a man stripped of his mask, a man clinging desperately to any last shred of hope. As he stood before the judge, there was no polished speech, no carefully
of that evidence, and it is not relevant here and should play no role at sentencing. Now, his attorneys argue Diddy and his girlfriends, specifically Cassie and Jane Doe, were all adults when they participated in the Wild King nights or hotel nights or freak-offs. The defense says Combs had serious relationships with those women and were in consensual sexual experiences with adult third parties. And they argue he didn't profit in any way of these hotel nights or freak-offs like a Mann Act defendant typically would. Throughout his trial, drugs were brought up ad nauseum, and this recent court filing was no exception. Diddy's lawyers claim drugs and a high-profile celebrity lifestyle played a role in his conduct. They wrote, without minimizing Mr. Combs' conduct, this is in many ways a sex, drugs, and rock and roll story. Mr. Combs had severe substance abuse problems throughout the entirety of the offense conduct and participated in a high-octane celebrity lifestyle. So did Miss Ventura, independently and not because of Mr. Combs. As for Jane, she willingly took ecstasy and other drugs with Mr. Combs, which became a part of their relationship. Now, during trial, the defense seemingly implied what happened in 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel was due to a bad batch of drugs. But in this new filing, Diddy's defense team says that the Intercontinental Hotel beating of Cassie was a rare time where Combs committed acts of violence during his relationship with Cassie. This despite Cassie herself testifying she couldn't recall how many beatings there were because there were so many. In this recent filing, though, the defense wrote, the violence was not entirely one-sided. However, Ms. Ventura testified there were times when she initiated physical fights with Mr. Combs. On one occasion, for example, she punched Mr. Combs in the face. Mr. Combs, for his part, is the first to exclaim that these acts of domestic violence against Ms. Ventura are inexcusable. But the notion that the violence or coercion had a nexus to freak-offs is not true, as the jury clearly found. Now, part of the reason the judge kept him behind bars pending sentencing was because he admitted to being physically violent with Jane as recently as June of 2024, 3 months before his arrest. Jane testified she started that physical altercation and admitted to throwing things at him, calling him a pedophile and a monster after punching him in the head. The defense wrote, by that point, Mr. Combs was intoxicated as he had consumed multiple glasses of champagne and multiple shots of tequila. Again, Mr. Combs knows that partaking in any type of physical violence with a woman is inexcusable, but the jury rejected the argument that the violence caused Jane to participate in a hotel night. Throughout the court filing, the mogul's defense team argues his conviction isn't like other Mann Act cases where the DOJ, for example, limits the prosecutions to cases involving sex trafficking minors or defendants who engage in commercial prostitution enterprises as panderers or call girl operations. They wrote, quote, in other words, only 1% of Mann Act cases we identified involved so-called buyers or Johns. That number alone speaks volumes and corroborates the conclusion that the DOJ does not seek to incarcerate Mann Act defendants who merely purchase prostitution services. During the trial, we learned through testimony what some of the male escorts or entertainers that were hired do during these freak-offs or hotel nights, and that was through the testimony of Daniel Phillips and Sheree Hayes, aka the Punisher. Diddy's defense argued this is the only case they've identified where prosecutors claim professional consenting adult males were Mann Act victims. Writing, the government now claims that the male escorts were Mr. Combs' victims, but this is apparently the only case in Mann Act history where the government has argued that consenting professional adult male escorts or entertainers who made thousands of dollars were victims. The Mann Act did not originally treat men as victims, and Congress never anticipated such an application of the statute. They argue the time he served has been punishment enough, especially serving time at MDC Brooklyn.
Crafted defense, no sharp-tongued lawyer doing all the talking for him. Instead, there was raw desperation pouring from his mouth. Diddy broke down completely. his words tumbling out in a plea so intense that it froze the entire courtroom in silence. His voice cracked, his hands trembled, and his eyes welled up as he begged the judge for immediate freedom. He painted a disturbing picture of what life had become for him inside. He spoke of nights where sleep never came, of the constant fear that gripped him every time the lights went out. He described the threats whispered from the shadows, the stares that followed him in the cafeteria, the knowledge that at any moment he could be cornered and attacked. He spoke of being pushed to the edge mentally, his thoughts unraveling, his mind consumed by the weight of his circumstances. He told the court that prison wasn't just punishment, it was torment, that the attacks he had already faced had broken him, that every single day was survival.
His team argued the mogul is routinely subjected to violence, both directed at him and at others. They point one example from less than 2 weeks ago, writing, on September 12th, for example, defense counsel was in the middle of a legal video call with Mr. Combs, which was summarily ended at 2 p.m. because of a stabbing that locked the facility down for the next several days. They write living conditions at MDC remain inhumane, lockdowns remain common, and other conditions are similarly horrible. There are 10 different examples listed of what Diddy's life truly has been like behind bars, a far cry from his life of luxury, including constant suicide watch. This means that every 10 hours, Mr. Combs must present his identification card to the guards to show that he is alive and well. Limited access to clean water. Mr. Combs often heats his water to have clean water to drink without getting sick. Sleeping in a dorm-style room within 2 feet from other inmates with the bathroom in the same room with no door. Mr. Combs has not breathed fresh air in nearly 13 months or felt sunlight on his skin. Often walking with a limp due to a painful knee injury that requires surgery that he has not received in federal custody. Lack of access to healthy or edible food, which is essential to pre-diabetics. The food that Mr. Combs has survived on includes expired processed pork, chicken, and beef, which on any given day can contain maggots. Lack of physical exercise with weights or any proper equipment. No physical therapy for his several shoulder and knee injuries. No functioning washing machines/dryers. And extreme temperatures, freezing cold or burning hot. Now, after his trial and the dozens of lawsuits he faces, his lawyers argue that his legacy has been destroyed, stating, due to adverse publicity and the allegations which the jury rejected, he faces nearly 100 lawsuits, most of which have been filed by individuals he has never met before, all of which contain made-up claims by individuals seeking to profit from Mr. Combs' downfall. Unfortunately, these lawsuits have involved his family, with his 84-year-old mother being sued in several states by individuals and his sons also being sued alongside Mr. Combs. They go on to write, as bad as life is inside of MDC, Mr. Combs has suffered countless other losses. Since his incarceration and conviction on the Mann Act, these and other collateral consequences to his life have been personally devastating. He has been separated from his family, has mounting legal bills from the indictment and defending lawsuits that were the direct result of the United States Attorney Damian Williams' prejudicial press conference announcing this case, and has lived in MDC for over a year, despite having every intention on fighting this case from day one. His defense attorneys cite other instances where his life has been systematically dismantled. For example, after Cassie's lawsuit and the lawsuits after, his companies were unable to operate as they once were, and he had to let go of over 1,000 employees. Some employees, according to the document, were unable to get new employment because of their past association with the mogul. His federal case has also had devastating consequences for his children. They were canceled and lost business opportunities. The family's Hulu show was canceled after Cassie's lawsuit. He was removed from the boards of 3 charter schools he created. He was stripped of his honorary doctorate degree from Howard University. He was forced to return the key to the city of New York. And he had to step down from his TV network, Revolt, which according to the filing was one of 2 black TV networks in the United States. So in all, the defense is hoping the judge sentences him to a 14-month sentence, meaning if the judge sides with him, it's likely he could be out of jail before the holidays. As of this recording, though, prosecutors haven't submitted their recommendations for his sentencing, but they've previously said that he has an extreme history of violence and that the attempts to minimize his conduct show he's still very dangerous. So that was a lot.
And survival was slipping further and further from his grasp. He admitted that he wasn't safe, that he wasn't stable, and that he could not endure another day behind those bars. And in that moment, the man who once built an empire on confidence and control was reduced to nothing more than a prisoner begging for mercy. The irony was painful. This was Sean Combs, the man who once projected power everywhere he went, the man who ran an empire, the man who controlled music, fashion, television, and culture. The man who once commanded rooms with his presence was now on his knees in every sense of the word, pleading for a lifeline from a judge who held his future in her hands. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Diddy's breakdown continued. Every word he spoke carried the weight of desperation. Every tear he shed revealed just how far he had fallen. For decades, Diddy had built an image of being untouchable, of being the boss, the man no
Right? A lot of legalese, a lot of pages to go through. So let's break it down further with none other than criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer. Safa, always great to see you, and thanks so much for joining me. Let's take a little step back. It's almost sentencing time for Diddy. He needs support. The defense sent a bunch of letters, some including from Young Miami, Dallas Austin, Stevie J, the mothers of his daughters Love and Chance, his mom, his sister, all of his kids minus the youngest one. But what did you make of the letters of support?
I'm not surprised to see letters of support here. That's actually pretty typical as sentencing is about to commence, or shortly, at least a week or two before the sentencing commences. And a lot of times defendants and clients will submit letters that are on behalf of family members and loved ones, giving a clearer picture to the judge as to who this person is generally, or who this person is and what they mean to their family and their loved ones. And that's a part of what we call a mitigation or sentencing memorandum that goes to the court in order to get a lesser sentence, or to give the judge an idea of, this is a good guy, you know, mistakes happen or bad things happen, but he's been reformed, rehabilitated, and we as his family need him back.
And are you surprised more famous faces didn't come front and center to possibly also voice their support in favor of Diddy? I was surprised to only kind of see really the three standout names being Dallas Austin, Young Miami, and Stevie J, at least to me. But are you surprised other famous faces didn't also voice their support through letters, like maybe Ye, who attended the court that one day?
I'm actually not too surprised that we haven't heard more from some of the other celebrities, because I think that anybody with a pretty sound PR team is going to tell them to stay far away from this and to not give any opinions of it. I am kind of surprised that we haven't heard anything from Ye, but you know, that's his prerogative. Of course, he has shown his support throughout the trial, and anybody who is willing and wants to support Mr. Combs through the sentencing phase and provide a memorandum or a letter, excuse me, then they're able to do that. But I think considering what the defense has provided to the court, there have been significant amounts of letters and things of that nature that the judge can go off of to get another side of Mr. Combs, maybe different from what the judge has for that trial.
Do you think any of the letters kind of swayed maybe even your opinion in terms of what we heard at trial versus kind of the aftermath, even, you know, before the trial began, that made you change your opinion in any type of way? I kind of felt like everything just felt kind of repetitive a little bit.
I think the most captivating letter that I got a chance to view was his mother's, and she makes a very good point. She's an 85-year-old woman, or in her mid-80s. She doesn't know how much time she has left on this earth. And so one of the things that I think is important and what really spoke to me and would probably speak to the judge is wanting the ability to spend the end of her life with her, granting them the ability to reconcile their relationship outside of him being incarcerated, also granting the ability for the family to essentially be reunited and to satisfy this mother's wishes of having her son reunited with his children, her grandchildren, so that they can heal, move forward, and spend the rest of her life, or her last years together.
And, you know, Janice was a fixture at every single day at trial. I don't think there was a day she missed. She was there every single day inside that courtroom, making sure that her son had support during especially those hard parts of the testimony and hard parts of the trial. But what's your reaction to the defense asking for 14 months? Would that essentially mean if the judge goes in favor of the defense, is it possible that Diddy could walk out of that courthouse next week?
Absolutely. That is exactly the case. And that's what the defense is essentially going for, is that 14-month sentence, which I'm not exactly sure of the time calculation that
no one could take down. But that image had been destroyed, shattered by the brutal reality of prison life. The empire was gone. The wealth meant nothing. The fame was irrelevant. All that remained was a broken man fighting to stay alive inside a system that cared nothing for who he was. Observers described the moment as surreal. To see a man who had once stood at the top of the entertainment industry who had once been idolized and feared, standing there trembling, his voice quivering, begging for freedom. It was a collapse unlike anything the public had ever witnessed. This wasn't arrogance. This wasn't defiance. This was surrender. This was a man finally admitting that he was broken. And yet, the judge remained silent as he spoke. No immediate reaction. No interruption. Just silence as Diddy pleaded, the courtroom frozen in place as if time itself had stopped. It was a moment.
Well, I mean, we know that behind the scenes, what they want, of course, is they expect a chance that he's going to be released. So that's their big motivating factor, of course. Whether the court abides by that, I mean, it is a substantial change in circumstance. He was acquitted of all of these serious charges, right?
But he was
Like
just denied bail. He was denied bail again.
he was denied bail again, and I actually learned that on your segment yesterday afternoon as I was sort of
Yeah, yeah.
doing my preparation for this. But we have to remember that one of the things that he got in trouble for, that Diddy got in trouble for in jail, was using other inmates' calling number. Remember that? So he was calling witnesses in the case from jail using other inmates. That was a direct affront to that judge. That was remember, we had all those attempts at bail that were denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can he be expected to actually follow the terms of a bail agreement when he's out of custody?
Right, right.
And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon. That any judge who has a criminal defendant who behaves like that is an affront to the court itself. It's disrespectful to the court. And it's almost like he couldn't get out of his own way there at the beginning. But he had an excellent defense team.
He does. So assuming for a moment, whenever the sentencing hearing happens, right? Let's say it happens in a month from now. Let's say it has October 3rd. The question is, what's his sentence? As we mentioned, the prosecution in a filing from yesterday talked about the guidelines range being 51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. As we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here, and it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court. The probation department can make a recommendation, but the DA will certainly have more ability, most of the time, to talk a judge in or out of a sentencing recommendation from the probation department. Federal court is different. They really put a lot of weight on those. So that's something that I think is going to be very interesting. And a lot of that will come down to what the individuals involved in that investigation, even though it shouldn't impact their professional recommendation. It's really, I think we're going to see what they thought of the case. Did they think he got away with something horrific here? Did they think that he was getting railroaded from the beginning? I think that may reflect.
Moment that revealed just how fragile even the most powerful of men can become when stripped of their armor. For Diddy, the nightmare has been relentless. Prison has not only taken away his freedom, it has broken his spirit. He has faced attacks that left him shaken, isolation that drove him into despair, threats that forced him to live in constant fear. Every single day inside has been a battle, and every battle has taken something away from him until there was nothing left but desperation. That desperation poured out in court, raw and unfiltered, as he begged for immediate release. But the reality is cruel. Judges do not easily grant freedom to men in Diddy's position. The system does not bend simply because someone is struggling. The courts do not show mercy just because a man cries, no matter how powerful he once was. For Diddy, his pleas may fall on deaf ears. His tears may go unanswered. His desperation may mean nothing in the eyes of the law. And yet, the image of that moment, the image of Diddy breaking down, crying, begging, trembling, will forever remain etched in the minds of those who witnessed it. It is a haunting reminder of how quickly power can vanish, how swiftly empires can collapse, how suddenly the mighty can fall. Once, Diddy stood as a symbol of success, wealth, and influence. Now he stands as a symbol of downfall, a man broken by his own circumstances, begging for a mercy that may never come. The world has watched his rise. The world is now watching his fall. And in that courtroom, as he pleaded with the judge for immediate freedom, the world saw a man who has been pushed to the edge, a man no longer in control, a man consumed by the nightmare of prison life. His story, once one of triumph, is now one of survival. And the question that hangs in the air is whether Diddy will ever escape the nightmare, or whether this moment of desperation is just another chapter in the long, slow collapse of a man who once thought he was untouchable. He described the constant fear, the threats, the sleepless nights, the haunting knowledge that every moment behind prison walls could be his last. The attacks, the isolation, the endless torment from both guards and inmates. It had all finally shattered the image of invincibility he once clung to. He told the court that he was not safe, that prison was breaking him in ways the public could never imagine, and that his only hope of survival was immediate release. The judge listened in silence as Diddy continued, his voice cracking, his hands trembling. This wasn't the Diddy the world once knew. This wasn't the mogul who strutted across red carpets or threw million-dollar parties. This was a man exposed, stripped of every ounce of power, standing before the court as nothing more than a prisoner begging for mercy. The silence after his plea spoke louder than his words. The silence was the sound of power being stripped away. The silence was the sound of a courtroom that had no sympathy for a man who had once ruled an industry. The silence was the harsh reminder that no matter how much you beg, no matter how much you cry, no matter how much you plead, prison has a way of reminding you that you are no different than any other inmate trapped within its walls. And so Diddy stands, broken, desperate, begging for a freedom that feels further away than ever. His empire may be gone, his power may be shattered, but his cries echo louder than they ever have before. The world is listening. The world is watching, and the world now knows that Sean Diddy Combs has been pushed to the very edge. Every moment behind those bars chips away at the man he once was, and in court, he revealed just how deep the cracks have become. The mogul is gone. The mask is gone. The illusion is gone. All that remains is the broken man, the desperate prisoner, the man begging a judge for immediate release as his nightmare continues to consume him. And whether or not that judge grants him mercy, one thing is undeniable. The Diddy the world once knew is gone forever, replaced by a man whose fall from grace has become one of the most devastating in history.